presentation on inventory adjustment approvals. It's a pretty quick webinar today. I want to introduce you to our presenter. His name is Casey Andrews. Casey leads our solution development group and is intimately familiar with the ins and outs of how inventory works inside of NetSuite. Just a quick personal note, a year ago at this time, Casey was in a hospital fighting for his life. He had a set of doctors tell me he needed to find a liver match in a couple of weeks or things were not going to turn out well. And thankfully, a few days later, he found a match. And Casey had a hard road back for a year, but he is with us today. And this is a guy that appreciates every single day, even days in quarantine. So I think we're all excited about maybe some of the countries starting to open up and maybe Casey can get out of the house a little more now. So Casey, thank you very much for your time. We look forward to what you have to say, and I'm going to hand it off to you.
And yes, as I've told most of my family, being cooped up in a hospital bed attached to IVs and things like that is much worse than being able to go outside and do the things in quarantine. So yeah, I'm adjusting to quarantine pretty well. All right, so today we will be discussing one of our fine solutions, and that is inventory adjustment approvals. It's a pretty simple and straightforward solution. The main reason that we created this solution is to mitigate all the risk associated with the inventory adjustment transaction within NetSuite. As most of us do know, there aren't any approvals in a standard form for the inventory adjustment, which is kind of counterintuitive because you are directly affecting your inventory levels. And so it is paramount to have multiple sets of eyes and to ensure that the accuracy of those inventory adjustments is perfect before making any adjustments. So what we've created is a simple solution that mimics the look and feel of the inventory adjustment, but allows multiple sets of eyes and an approval process with it. So with that, I'll get into these slides. We have a couple of slides, and then I'll jump into a demo so you can see it live. And one other note, this solution is built for NetSuite certified. So NetSuite has reviewed it and approved it, and so it's all good. Ooh, jumped ahead there. All right, so first off, we're going to talk about the key benefits here. So as I mentioned before, risk mitigation is the key here. Anytime you're adjusting or manipulating your inventory in any way, you want to make sure that, number one, the right people are doing it, and number two, that the quantities that you're adjusting in and out are the correct quantities. I don't know how many times over the career in support that we've had to modify incorrectly entered inventory adjustments, and it's not always as straightforward as it seems. So having the correct inventory counts and the adjustments done in the first place and the first time is paramount. So with that in mind, we created this particular solution, and it has the same look and feel as a standard inventory adjustment. You have all of the accounts and all of the fields that you're very familiar with, and as well as the lines and the quantities in and out, which I'll show you. Another key benefit is the ability to update before submission. So if you're going to be doing an account throughout the day and you have other tasks that pull you away, you can go through, enter this inventory adjustment request, which is the custom transaction that we've created, and save it, and then go back and edit it before you submit it to your approver. So we'll go through that here in just a second. So as I mentioned, it's a familiar look. It looks just like the inventory adjustment. You have the ability to add all the different lines as you go. You can specify all of the different things that are important to an inventory adjustment, such as your subsidiary and your department, as well as your adjustment location, and then all of the items, of course. So one thing to note here that we'll hit on when I go through the demo is we have some different logic that's built in when we create a positive adjustment or a negative adjustment. So whenever we're adjusting in a positive manner, we have the ability to update the unit cost of that particular line. Sometimes that is necessary, sometimes it's not, but we give you the option when that's the case. When you're adjusting the inventory in a negative fashion, we lock down the cost so you can't go in and zero those out or whatever. And that's just a precaution that we set so it keeps everybody honest. With the same fashion that we have in the regular inventory adjustment, you have the ability to define the inventory detail. So on the line level, there's a box that you can see in the bottom screenshot there. You click on that little box and it will generate the pop-up that will allow us to define our inventory detail for that particular item. So if you're using inventory statuses, that's fine. You can choose whatever inventory status you want. And then also when you enter your quantity, one thing to note is that you always have to match the quantity in the line level, so right here, with the quantity that is expected. So if you are expecting 15, the line level expects 15 as well. So it can be multiple different lines, but at the end of the day, the sum total of those lines need to equal the quantity expected at the top. And you can see that this is down here as well, and we'll go through that. The submission for approval is, once again, very important in the fact that we do have multiple things going on as workers, whether you're in the warehouse or you're in the back office. So you do have the ability to save as you go on these inventory adjustment requests. You can make all of the edits and review your submission before you actually send it to your approval. And then we have multiple different fields on the employee record to define the approver limits, the next approver, and so on. And once you're ready to finally actually submit that record, all you have to do is click the Submit for Approval button. It'll validate all of the information that you've entered, and then it'll send that inventory adjustment request to your approver, in which case they can review it. At this point as well, like they're reviewing it, nothing has actually impacted your inventory at all. And so once they feel that this is an accurate inventory adjustment, that's when they can approve it. And once they approve, it does go in and create the standard inventory adjustment, just like we're used to. As stated, once approved, the standard inventory adjustment is created, and we have created a related inventory adjustment request, or I'm sorry, a related inventory adjustment field on the request. So once you do create it, you can see the inventory adjustment that has been created from this request, and you can go directly to it. It's very handy when you're running any kind of saved searches to look at, the relationship between the request and the actual adjustment, and it's just a nice handy field to have there for you. And once again, it is all about mitigating the risk associated with moving your inventory quantities up or down. So with that, let's jump into the demo here, and we'll get into what this looks like in real life. So we can go to inventory, and we'll select our new inventory adjustment request. And now, just like in the PowerPoint, we'll go through and we'll enter all the relevant fields at the memo, or at the header rather, not at the memo. And then we'll select our subsidiary. Once we select the subsidiary, that will source a lot of the fields in this particular header region. So you can see that the currency is selected to US dollar because it's a US subsidiary, and the exchange rate is 1-to-1. Also, you'll want to define your department or your adjustment location. For this particular demo, we don't have another location. We're just using this particular one. And then you can see that the status is pending approval. Right now, we don't have to worry about submitting for approval. We'll just save it first, but we'll fill out the rest of these fields first. So I'm going to select an adjustment account. For this, I've got a dummy account that I'm going to select. And then just like normal, we'll go through and enter our items. So we'll select that item. We'll select our location. And then as we talked about earlier, if it's a positive adjustment, so let's say we're going to adjust this by 15, I have the ability to go in and modify this estimated unit cost. So let's say that it's 70 instead of 71, that's fine. But if I was to add this as a negative adjustment, so I can say that we have 15 less than we actually thought, then you can see that this particular estimated unit cost field is locked down, so we can't go modify that. And it reverts to the standard estimated unit cost. But I'm going to go back to a positive adjustment here. And then there's one more field that I need to enter on this line, and I'll do the same account. And then we'll define our inventory detail. So here we have this little checkbox. There's logic built behind that checkbox. All we need to do is click it, and then the pop-up will show up for us to enter in our inventory detail. As stated before, if you need to use or if your company uses the inventory status field, you can select that here. I'm going to select that these are good. And then once again, we need to match our quantity expected with the quantity here. So let's go ahead and say that we have 15 that we're going to add back in, and they're good. So once we do that, we can submit. You get a little pop-up here, but all you have to do is click the Leave Page button. And now you can see that the inventory detail flag is checked on that specific line. So what you need to do is anytime you're running a count or you're about to do an inventory adjustment, you can run through all the different lines that you want. It's the same process. So item and then specify all those fields on the line level. If they have inventory detail, you would enter it. If they don't, you don't have to worry about it. And then just like normal, you would click add. I'm not going to create more than that because once you see one, you probably can figure out what the next ones are like. So we'll go ahead now and save. If there's any fields that we did miss, the system will tell us, and just like anything, like any mandatory fields, it'll prompt you to fill those out, but then it'll save. So now, just like before, we can kind of save it as we go. So let's say I got one item in and I had to go do some other task, and now I get to come back. I can go edit this and add more lines if I want, or maybe even I walked by and I was on my way to do something else and noticed that there was another box of these items that were stuck away in the storage closet or something like that. At that point in time, I could revise my count on this line and save it again. So now that I'm sure that we're adjusting the quantity by a positive 15, I can submit this for approval. Now, one thing to note is I am in an administrator role at this point, so you won't necessarily see the flow of administrator to, or warehouse manager to administrator or back office person to approve it, but you get the idea that whenever the person submits this inventory request, a person will be notified, whether it's via email or via on their reminders on their dashboard, that they have an inventory adjustment request to be approved. They will open it up. It will look just like this, and they will have the ability to approve it. But first, we would need to submit that for approval. So now it's going through that exact process that I just mentioned. It's going through and checking all the approval fields, which we'll see here in just a second, and making sure that all the limits that are set up, whether that's the limit of how much I can actually set for an inventory adjustment, or however much I can submit without having to get approval. Let's say I have a $500 limit that I could create it, but anything over $500 needs to be approved by a different person. Those rules, all those approval rules are set up on the employee record, and that's what drives the workflow behind the scenes. You can also see in this transaction that we have an approval log here. You can see my level of approvers and which approvers are there, as well as their approver limits. So you can see those different things as well. But now the inventory adjustment request. So once again, this is the interim step between counting the inventory, entering the inventory, and the inventory adjustment actually being created. So the request is the interim step there, has been approved, and now we have a related inventory adjustment, which is the standard version already created in the system and linked to this request. So I can go to that inventory adjustment just to see that this is the true inventory adjustment here, and we can see our GL impact, seeing that it is from this account and it actually goes to that account as well. So all this information is contained and reflected within the system, and we can go back to that. So once again, very simple process, something that we saw as a big gap in NetSuite standard functionality, and so we created this solution. We needed to mitigate any of the risk that is associated with adjusting or affecting your on-hand inventory value, and it needs to be seen by multiple sets of eyes. So with the inventory adjustment approval solution, we've created just that, and it's simple, straightforward, and very, very handy when it comes down to this. I think that if NetSuite offered this as a standard situation, every client using NetSuite and inventory would be using this. But that's pretty much it. If you have any questions about this particular solution, please let me know. We can go to this here. We've got Archie, the TVG shop dog, if you will. He's trying to get some treats adjusted out of our inventory for this. So that was his question.